Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's video on religious trauma. My name is Angel DeSantis. I am a religious trauma counselor and a yoga teacher. Thank you for being here. If this is your first video with me, I grew up in a cult called the Children of God, and I've been out for about 12 years now. I've done a lot of therapy. I've been through a lot of different mental, physical, and emotional therapies to help me heal so that I can do this, so that I can sit here, share my story, and hopefully allow you to feel less alone wherever you are on this journey. So I'm going to talk today about victimhood and narcissism sometimes being your only option for personality when you are in a deeply religious environment. And I'm going to unpack all of that. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. And if you've been here a time or two before, be sure to hit like and subscribe because it does help. But I'm going to start with kind of the baseline of what religious trauma teaches you is that the world is basically bad. And if the world is basically bad and bad things are going to happen to you, then they can swoop in with the unless. Unless you have God, your world is terrible. And unless you have God, you're going to have a horrible experience and you're going to hell. So they have to start with that. And then they can swoop in with the rescue. And how that affects your personality is they also have to teach you that your personality and who you are as a human being is also basically bad. And I know this won't be just true for me, but I think it's true for a lot of different religious establishments, is that they really overexpose and harp on the evil in the world. I know in my cult, they would show us news clippings of a bunch of child abuse that happened, quote, in the world. And aren't we glad that our child abuse was done out of love, not like the system, which is bad. And they would show us like videos of riots, videos of murder, and videos of corrupt politicians, Waco. They would really harp on all of the bad things that were happening because then, again, they could swoop in with the rescue. And how that translates to your personality is if you are inherently bad, and they do really exaggerate your flaws. They call out every flaw or every mistake that you make, and they relegate it to you're not good enough, you're not saintly enough, you're not praying enough, or Satan is attacking you, God is trying to teach you a lesson. And then the only option for your personality becomes victimhood. Because you can't stand up and say, I believe this, I want to do this. That's pride. You can't be like, I disagree with this, because that's Satan. So your only option sometimes when you are a victim of religious trauma is to develop a personality of victimhood. And then you can blame all of your problems on, well, God told me to do this, Satan told me to do this, God doesn't want me to do this, Satan was tempting me. And you get to absolve yourself completely of the responsibility for who you are, because you're just a victim of circumstance. And it's always some other external vibe, I guess, some other external thing that is pressuring you or swaying your life or knocking it about. And that's why you can see these pastors who cheat on their wives, and then they can come back and be like, I didn't do it, Satan did it. And everyone's like, oh my God, you're right, Satan did it. It wasn't you, it was the temptress. Or you see people, embezzling money and then being like, oh, Satan tempted me, I couldn't resist. This was a lesson for me to learn. And everyone's like, So sometimes your only option for personality is being a victim, because everyone and everything around you enables that. And when you say, hey, look, it wasn't me, I was a victim, people say, wow, you're right, but here's the remedy, come back to God. And you say, yeah, I'm coming back to God. And everyone goes, okay. And it's this little enabler cycle. But the only thing that it enables is you being this lovely little helpless victim with no direction of your own, because that is the perfect thing that they want. That's who they can control. If you really believe that nothing is your responsibility, nothing is your fault, you don't know what to do with your life, that is like perfect, ripe for the picking person, so that religion can come in and, quote, save you from yourself, because you are inherently bad. So the way that I kind of found this out about myself, in that I really felt like a victim, first of all, it should be said that the people who mostly feel like victims very likely have been victims. And I have a right to feel like a victim. I have been victimized. I've been abused. That I am a victim. And I can keep that. I can keep that for the rest of my life. And if I want to use that as an excuse for my behavior for the rest of my life, I get to. And it's the same thing for you. It's likely that if you feel like a victim, you have been. And you're definitely not the only one. There have been so many victims. But I think it's important to note that that is a real thing. That if you have actually been a victim, it's true, and you get to keep that. Where it kind of gets blurred lines, or where it gets detrimental to you, is if that's your only sense of personality. If that's the only thing that makes sense to you, if that's the only thing that's allowed to develop is that you are a victim, then everything else is underdeveloped. And kind of how these cults or religiously abusive environments will overexpose the evil, it will overexpose you to the fact that you are helpless. And you may really, really believe that you are helpless. And if you feel that way, it's important to understand why you feel that way, because you're not helpless. And if you were a human being in the wild, you would learn to help yourself. So the environment that you grow up in very much molds and shapes the personality that you are. And if you only had one option for your personality, it's likely that that part of your personality will overdevelop. And the way, again, that I found this out for me is I was really, really deeply insecure. And I knew that I had been victimized. And once I found out that I could say I was a victim and people would feel sorry for me, I was like, really? Like, this is great. I never had anyone feel sorry for me before. So it was really fantastic for a while there. But then I started realizing, why do I think I'm so helpless? Because I don't feel helpless. I know that there's a part of me that can be really strong. I just don't know how to access it. And then that was the moment for me of being like, wait, if I truly believe there's something inside of me that is really strong and wants to stand up and wants to talk back and wants to make statements for myself, if I really believe that that's inside of me, then how can I cultivate it? And then also realizing, like, is who I am I just a victim of circumstance, and is really nothing my fault and is nothing my choice? Or do I actually have a say in the parts of my personality that I have and that I want to develop? So the remedy for feeling like you are a victim, I believe, is taking responsibility for the next step in your life. I think that there's so much that human beings are capable of, but unless you acknowledge it, then you're not actually capable of it. So if you want to be a victim for the rest of your life, you can be, but if you would like to move away from feeling like you don't understand what's happening in your life and things are just feeling heavy, and it's because your car broke down, or it's because you got fired, or it's because no one understands you. If you feel that way, you get to feel that way, but also ask why you feel that way. And if you would like to feel empowered, if you would like to feel strong, if you would like to have a bigger personality, ask yourself, what can I take responsibility for? And that is always the first step into the next level of power, of personal power, is what can I take responsibility for? So if you're feeling like a victim and you're feeling like you don't understand why your house is flooded or why your neighbor is upset at you, take a look around you and just ask yourself, what can I take responsibility for now? And let that lead you into the next phase of understanding about yourself in your life. The next thing that I want to talk about is not wanting to be like your abuser. And I think that was something that was very, very strong for me, is I knew I didn't want to be anything like my abuser. And when I talked to leadership, or when I talked to the people responsible for my abuse, the thread that would keep coming up is that it wasn't their fault. They beat me because I was bad. They had to hit me because whatever it was. And it was always some sort of external circumstance that made them act horribly towards me. It was never their personal choice. It was out of their hands, which again is that victim mentality of like, oh, if I had a choice, it would be different. But because such and such happened, it made me be this horrible person. Like, I got angry at you. I had this one person come in. I was hanging out with some friends. We were like 13 years old. He came in, he cursed us all out. He called us little sluts, and then he left. And then he came back an hour later, and he was like, I know that I should apologize, but if God didn't want me to call you little sluts, he would have stopped me. So I'm going to say that God wanted me to tell you that you were a slut. And then he left. And that was his apology. But again, no personal responsibility. It was not his fault. And if God wanted to stop him, God would have stopped him. And when I think about that and I reflect on that, again, the thing that shows up is that he's just a victim. He's a victim of circumstance. He was reacting to whatever it was in the moment that caused him to act this way, and it wasn't his fault. So my thing in trying to get away from victimhood is, can I say only the things that I'm willing to take responsibility for? Can I do only the things that I'm willing to take responsibility for? And if that was true, where does that take me? And where it takes me is into not becoming my abuser. If I take responsibility for my words and actions, there's nothing that would make sense for me to take responsibility for that would cause harm to another person. It doesn't make sense to me to go out of my way to physically call somebody names or to verbalize, like, call somebody a slut. And I'd never want to be responsible for like actually physically harming another human being. And if I'm willing to take that responsibility, then I will not be like my abuser. And my abuser is not willing to take responsibility for the things that they do. And so if I'm willing to take responsibility for the things that I do, then I will not be like them. And I think that for a lot of us who have been abused, that's a really big driving force of like, I want to be nothing like them. And so the way to be nothing like them, I believe, is to take personal responsibility for who you are and really embrace the fact that who you are is your choice, even if it doesn't feel that way. Even if right now in this moment, you can't really figure out how who you are is your choice. It is possible for you to choose exactly who you are, exactly who you want to be, and to head in a very specific direction. So I really encourage you, if you feel like a victim and if you feel like some of this might ring true for you, like you might have a victimhood personality, understand that that might have been your only option, but now that you know about it, now you have other options. And so again, the thing to ask yourself is, what is the next right step? What am I willing to take responsibility for? And I really hope that you find that you can take responsibility for who you are. You can take responsibility for the choices that you make, the things that you say and the things that you do. And I think the amount that you are willing to take responsibility for in your life is the exact amount of freedom that you will be afforded in your life. So if you want to be free and you want to be nothing like your abusers, take responsibility for who you are. Take responsibility for the choices that you make and the personality that you have, and let that lead you into the next right step. And as you are willing to look for it, you will find it. So I hope that this has made sense, at least a little bit. As always, if you have comments or questions or thoughts or books or anything like that, leave it below. I do read the comments. I do see what you say. And again, I hope that this has been helpful. And thank you, as always, for being here. And I will see you next week.